Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. Wow, that was a mouthful, and I was totally thrown off because
you speak goat now.
yeah. Was Jeffrey? It was
Quick
like
on the trigger.
You were quick on the trigger
Like
today.
we're not going to be late today.
No, you were the taskmaster. That was if you couldn't hear the goat, that's our transition to go live. So if you're listening at home in your ear holes, first of all, thank you so much for making us a priority to listen. But we have this goat. Sometimes Jeffrey leaves it in, sometimes he doesn't.
It's just been left in constantly now.
right.
Into the comments, so Nate was first again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Back to back first. Yep.
Winner, chicken dinner.
Joe O'Brien, good morning. And Giaga Jeepers, good morning, guys.
Good morning, all. Good morning. This is a happy Super Bowl morning after Super Bowl, whatever. And if you're if you're one of our unfortunate listeners who's a KC fan, maybe not such a happy morning for you because your team didn't even show up yesterday.
I think they forgot that they were supposed to play.
Something. They stayed out too late in New Orleans there partying. But if you're a Philly or Pennsylvania fan, congratulations. Something. And if you are a Buick Grand National fan, GNX fan, you got a little bit of love on air last night at halftime. Don't worry, folks. We're pretty certain that was a prop and that his actual GNX that Kendrick Lamar owns and loves is safely at home in his garage. That's the word on the automotive street right now. So yes. Go ahead and settle your horses. Settle all of them. And also, if you are like me, you don't actually think a Grand National is that cool.
Ouch.
So today's episode, we're going to actually be talking about a couple things that some people may find really cool and some people may not.
And I will say, do you know that Grand National is one of Greg's favorite cars?
It's also one of my favorite cars.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. You were cool until you said that.
That's fine.
Wow.
My wife won't let me own one, though.
I'm here slaying on...
She says they're ugly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, see, okay. I could run the same body style Cutlass. I think the Cutlass is cool.
So comments are going crazy, and we're going to talk about Super Bowl commercial. I see that in the comments. Then I see, good morning, the OVJ Starlight Ride was a success. We missed you guys. That was from Andrew.
And we missed going. I would have loved to have gone. I was actually celebrating my dearest wife. We were downtown Pittsburgh, honestly.
And then Crawford County Jeepers said, happy sunshiny Monday. And Nate made a comment about the Jeep commercial that we will talk about in a little bit here.
Yes, it's a good comment. Very, very witty there. So... Go ahead.
We need to introduce the other two people. Jeff, the producer guy over there.
Well, okay.
Jeff the builder.
So I am the producer, and I am actually getting production notes as we were talking there. Davey the Savage has notified me that there is a new video up on Patreon.
Oh,
so
yes.
That is available now. If you haven't joined Patreon, now's the time. Go
you might
up.
consider joining. We've got some cool things in store for you, but definitely there's some just super fun content out there right now.
And we're really focusing in on making sure there's extra content on Patreon right now. So it's the time to subscribe.
And there's definitely some kind of ridiculous stuff on Patreon, more so than what we produce out for the rest of the market. And you, sir? You've introduced Jeff the builder,
the maddest mad scientist, Scott Brown.
Oh, he wanted you to get.
I know. He likes that intro.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
Share.
I need to make a transitional intro, like with all the bells and whistles, and make it all glorified for.
I want you to have Here Comes the Queen, like the actual God Save the Queen, pomp and circumstance music.
Well, that's gonna happen.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think that we need to cut to the chase, and I should mention that today's topic we are going to. Last week we dug in and we kind of chronicled the origins of SFJ, part 1, numero uno.
We're gonna address that again in the future.
Yep. Today, and obviously, welcome back, Scott. He's healing up a little bit from the plague that his family was encountering last week. Today we're going to be chronicling a specific Jeep, one of our customers, and kind of telling you where it came from. It's one that has become closely associated with the business. And I think it might be fun going forward. It is something unique we have to offer as a podcast, because we're not just podcasters in the sense that we're regurgitating information that's culturally and community relevant, but we are actually actively building and creating and interacting with customers. And so when I think, again, one of the things that's unique is we can tell you about these projects. And so we'll be chronicling the Squatch Patrol.
I have a question about that, and we'll get to
Okay.
that.
And I
Specifically about the name of the Jeep.
I like that it's kind of close to Valentine's Day, because I am calling it, in the back of my brain, the love affair with the Squatch Patrol. But it was a very cool title that you had put on, that you had titled today's program, right? Which was
Gears and Years, The
Yep.
Legend of Squatch Patrol.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll be talking about that. So Harrison Ford and the Jeep commercial.
In my opinion, that was the best commercial from the entire Super Bowl.
It was
hands
awesome.
down.
It was awesome. Jeep has over the years brought some great marketing to the Super Bowl commercials, and sometimes they've teased us. I didn't see anything about this in the leading up to the
No,
Super
they
Bowl.
kept this one pretty quiet.
Yeah, whereas I know a couple of years ago they had teased us, and so I had already seen the commercial prior to it
Yep.
being launched. But this was awesome, because not only did we, what I feel, cover the bases, right? Because we cover the rugged individualism, and
I think they kept it so quiet because they didn't want a retaliatory type ad in the Super Bowl with them.
that's probably true. That's probably true. And what we're talking about is we called out specifically the Ford Bronco.
Oh, without question. It was such a beautiful little. First, it was nice and quiet. They just passed the Bronco on the road, and I'm like, all right, well played, and message delivered. But at the end of the commercial, when Harrison Ford just spins that dagger in there.
Yeah, and he talks about his owner's manual, that he drives a Jeep, even though, and then he kind of mouths or subtly says, "My name is Ford."
Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought that was very cool. Now, I'm also going to talk about the fact that I really love the fact, and I think that you should hopefully get this from our podcast. I kind of really don't care about what anybody's creed is in life. We get to be unified under this Jeep brand.
Yeah.
And I love that that within reason, these commercials echo that. That's a personal feeling I have, that,
Yep.
we can have a lot of differing beliefs, and yet we can kind of come together and be unified under this brand. And I love that a lot of the talking points were largely about that in the commercial itself.
Well, and I also really like, and it's in our comments too, was a little sneak peek that they gave us.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited because I don't think people got it, right? I don't think people got it.
I think more people got it than you think.
Hmm.
It was a really nice in the background, and then quick as
But
it
see,
drives
the thing,
by.
it blew through, and it came on. It was 2 or 3 times that it was shown.
Correct. And literally the first time I saw it, I'm like, wait a minute. And then I saw it again. I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yes,
And then,
right.
and then there was a third one.
Yes, and it's all lit up, and it's beautiful. And
Doors
so
off.
What we're talking about, folks, is the Jeep Recon, and I am so excited about the Recon. Now, what's interesting is as the commercial goes on, you get a little 392 note in
Yep.
there. If you're listening, you know that there's absolutely a V8, and he talks about internal combustion engines to the sense of like, if that's your cup of tea, cool. He's driving a 4xe
Yep.
specifically, which he unplugs.
But they did show a 392 fire up and at the
100%
beginning
they
of the
did.
commercial.
100% they did.
Yeah.
Right. And so
But they're missing the most important Jeep in the whole commercial.
Go ahead.
The CJ.
That was in the background.
Was in
That
the
was in the
background with no
background.
top on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the most important Jeep. In
That
the whole
was a
commercial.
really nice touch.
And
too.
it was a nod to where the Jeep has come from. And so I
The
just,
CJ on the ranch, basically.
right.
Yeah,
That
I was
exactly
like, wow,
it.
that's well played.
That's exactly it. And then the Recon, if you are unfamiliar, it's a fully electric vehicle. It's teased as going to be, a fully electric off-roader. It's a smaller platform. So we're going to see the range out of it that people want to see out of an EV. Plus, it's meant to be a rugged off-road vehicle. It's harkens a little bit back to the TJ Wrangler size, which, you know, if you are a TJ Wrangler or a Cherokee, XJ Cherokee person, this is a great size. You know how well they work.
Nate pointed out no gladiators.
No Glads in this year. But you know, I liked what they brought to the table otherwise.
Matthew's asking about the Clint Eastwood Super Bowl commercial from about rebuilding America, possibly 2012. I do remember that. That was another very solid commercial.
And that's what I'm saying. I love what Jeep brings to the table when they really kind of use these unifying, thought-provoking, you know, attempting to unify people regardless of your background in this, what I feel I can identify as this you know, kind of bonding Americana, you know. So
Nate has a good point. He's thinking the Recon will have the internal combustion option as they walk back the electric mandate.
Is, you know, so here, as a person who's into EVs, right? And you know, I say that kind of proudly because there's a lot of people who take a stance where they just kind of boldly go against the electric world. And honestly, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fire up a 40s or 60s, you know, 134, whether it's a flathead or an overhead, and the rings are gone and it's going to smoke and it's puking oil, and I'm not bothered by that, folks. Right. So listen, I have no qualms. I've wheeled them. I've beat on them. I think they're wonderful to work on. But I also love advancements in technology. So here's the challenge I have is that quality EV vehicles, and you look at Tesla as a specific model of this, have to be engineered to be an EV vehicle. I think that's the largest hindrance to the Wrangler 4xe. Anytime that we try to retroactively shove a power plant in a vehicle, it ultimately has challenges, which is what we're seeing plaguing the PHEV 4xe series. When we engineer a vehicle to specifically and only and functionally be an EV, that's when it's a successful, you know, kind of acceptance of modern technology. So I'll be interested to see if we get an internal combustion engine in this Recon. I would love to see that based on, you know, our infrastructure could satisfy it, and I want to see this smaller platform, but it was built to be an EV. So it's like taking a Tesla truck and all of a sudden trying to make it, you know, LS swap it. I guess it's possible, but, you know, is that ideal?
There, before we get into our main topic, there was two other commercials that I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
Both were unifying commercials, in my opinion. One was unifying over food. Matthew McConaughey talking about how Super Bowl is all about selling
Was
food.
that the Instacart commercial?
No, Uber Eats.
Uber Eats.
Yeah.
I saw Instacart bring their heat.
Super funny. They had all the celebrity cameos in it.
Yes.
It was really well played. And then of course, horse walks into a bar.
Yeah. Oh, the Budweiser.
Oh, such a good Clydesdale commercial.
You know what? I've got a soft spot for those Clydesdale commercials.
Oh, I know.
I love those horses. So
Scott, I know you didn't see it, but they started off with the baby horse that they introduced. I think it was last year.
Was it last year or the year before?
Maybe it was 2 years ago. The horse was born. So they have this Clydesdale. You're too young yet. You need to get a little bit stronger, whatever. And they take off, and a keg falls off of the cart. So the Clydesdale baby jumps over the fence and starts rolling it, and goes down a hill, through a waterfall. I mean, the works.
Yeah.
And then ends up in town, and they clip to
the inside of the bar.
The bar, and there's two guys. I think they were playing pool, and so I got a joke. A horse walks into the bar, and as he says it, he looks up, and there's this little Clydesdale walking
Clydesdale nosing a keg into the bar.
And he just stares at it, and the other guy's like, and what?
It was a fun commercial. It was fun, and it was nice to see the Clydesdales out doing what they do. And
I still miss the Budweiser frogs, but the Clydesdales have done really good.
I don't miss the frogs at all. That was that had its time. I'm glad they're gone at this point.
That's fair.
I'm glad they're gone. So, all right. We are talking about this kind of what I'll call has infamous Jeep that a lot of people see in our social content. They see floating around the property. They'll see we've had it at shows, we've had it out wheeling. It's a pretty remarkable vehicle. And if you don't exactly know what I'm talking about, it is this 2001 TJ Wrangler. And at this point in time, it's kind of a monster. It stands out from a crowd, to say the least. And it obviously is proudly emblazoned down the hood, Squatch Patrol.
And that is where my question comes in. Did he build this to hunt Bigfoot?
You know what's funny? I would love for James to weigh in on where the namesake it comes himself, because I really didn't think like Central Florida had that many Bigfoot sightings. But
I thought you need mountainous terrain for Bigfoot. But maybe
Yeah.
there's a southern.
maybe there's
variant.
a southern Bigfoot.
Well, if you go far enough north, you got the Yeti, which is essentially a snow version of Bigfoot.
how far north? I mean, we're talking about Florida to here.
I know. So what's in Florida?
Yeah.
Do you go south? Does it change name again?
Right, Chupacabra.
Well, that's no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different. So, anywho, so this 2001 TJ has got a pretty unique backstory, and I think it's kind of a perfect testament when people, oftentimes when we're doing repairs or maintenance or some base modifications for a vehicle, I'll often be asked directly, do you think this Jeep is worth it? Right? They'll oftentimes ask me that, and they say, do you think this Jeep is worth investing in? Do you think this Jeep is worth lifting? Do you think I should be doing this? Right? And I understand the human sentiment. I oftentimes find myself asking this question about, whether it's something I'm doing with the house or a trailer that I'm looking at, something to that effect. And my response has become as a business, our official response back is, our job is not really to weigh in on the merit of the repair or the modification, but to tell you, the consumer, the customer, how we would do it with excellence, right? So if you bring me an absolute clapped out Jeep where rust is blowing through the side of the Jeep, such is life, we're a firm believer, and you can kind of fix anything,
Yes.
right?
And sometimes, we've talked about this before. I don't remember if we did on air or not, but sometimes you just need the catalyst to make an idea blossom. So you sometimes purchase an idea. You're not so much
buying a dream.
You're not purchasing the vehicle necessarily, because that can be disassembled or reassembled a multitude of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've made that purchase and now you own that piece of land, or now you own that vintage vehicle, or you go buy a brand new car, you've now invested in that direction. So
Yes.
now it feels more real, and now I can then make it what I want it to be. In this one, he did buy it new,
Right.
not mistaken. And the Jeep kind of evolved as he owned it.
Yes. And what I think is, to chronicle this as a degree is to say, we were first acquainted with James, we believe around 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't hard sort out the dates and times and whatnot like that. And what I can tell you is things that what we believe after the story has kind of blossomed over the years. So that puts us about a decade invested between James and his son Andy and us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Real quick, I'm just going to jump back to the comments.
Sure.
Because Don Jacobs he said it's skunk ape in Florida.
it definitely says skunk ape, not swamp ape. Huh. I don't know.
No idea.
So here's the interesting piece. It's the skunk ape. That's a new one.
I've not heard that one before.
So as far as I'm having this like association now with like, well, people do say like when you think you're around like Bigfoot, it smells bad. You know what I mean? Have you ever heard that from these Bigfoot hunters and stuff?
Mm-mm.
It's one of those things they claim is like there's a pungent aroma of like musky wild animal.
I got to be honest. I've never dove into the rabbit hole of Sasquatch.
The creachoid.
Not enough to know any of that.
I thought for sure you would be all about Squatch hunting.
No.
Wow. Okay.
No.
Fascinating.
No. Have you heard the Appalachian whistles and stuff like that?
Oh yeah.
That's enough for me. I've experienced that. I don't need to go hunt. I don't need to go hunt Sasquatch.
Oh my goodness.
You're happy he
Do
stays
you know
in
the Jersey
mountains?
Devil?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm familiar with most of them. I'm not gonna go hunt them.
Mothman. All
yeah.
right. We're off. We're off the rails again, folks.
We got to change
surprise,
it to
surprise.
myths and legends instead of
Surprise. We've gone off on a tangent.
All because of Skunk Ape.
Skunk Ape. Don threw us a curveball, and now we've done it. Okay, so we've developed this awesome relationship with James and Andy over the years, and I'll get to where we kind of initiate this. But my understanding is that James purchased this Jeep new in 2001. And it was plagued with a lot of the characteristic early 2000s Jeep problems. He actually had the head replaced at one point in time because of some casting or foundry issues, which kind of was infamous within the Jeep community. He had the transmission gone through at least once or twice. Mm-hmm. He had kind of a speed shift, an early style top load speed shift installed because the 3550 5-speed transmission was cumbersome, a little sloppy, and that was obviously an argument a lot of people had. He had kind of kept at this thing. Now, James has a pretty unique occupation in my mind. I've actually learned a lot from him over the years, and I appreciate the way his brain works. He is on the engineering side of things, but he's basically kind of an efficiencies expert in part. That's I think a good way to kind of sum him up. But his job has taken him not just all over the United States, but also all over the world. And so
it's actually really fun to hear from him on some of the efficiency things like the Kanbans and things like that.
Yeah, and the way that he helps other organizations, kind of pursue becoming better at what they do. But in that time frame, so somewhere around 2014, 2015, you and I started kind of an interesting endeavor, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to set James's Jeep aside, and we're going to talk about a little bit of what we were doing at that time.
Back in those days, which makes me sad.
Back
in the day.
I have a customer who reached out to me. I'm totally interrupting you, stealing your thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a 249 quad case,
Mm-hmm.
which he said works flawlessly. It has the diff lock. It's not actually diff lock, but the power lock. And he swapped it out for a 231. And he's like, I can't even give this thing away. Will you guys take it? And I was like, yeah, sure. We'll throw it on the shelf. But it's just a testament to back in the day. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I can't even get rid of this thing now. There was a time where transfer cases were coming and going so rapidly in our industry.
Yep.
We couldn't keep up with it.
Right.
So
when most people drove a TJ or an XJ or a ZJ, and you wanted to lift them beyond a certain height, especially a shorter wheelbase, you needed to adapt your transfer case from a slip yoke that was on the transfer case. And we went from a wet slip to a dry slip in that era to what was called an SYE, or a slip yoke eliminator.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much like step 2 or 3 of your modifications to your Jeep that you had to do. You would, do a lift and wheels and tires, and then you had to do a slip yoke because it was shaking your teeth out.
Because the alternative was you either put a belly drop, which, we knew specifically from TJs, they already had kind of a fat belly.
Yes.
So your breakover angle was poor.
Well, and
YJs weren't great, but TJs were worse.
And way back in the day, on my first 93 XJ that I had, I lifted it first, had wheels and tires sitting there, and then promptly had to build a T-case drop.
Yep.
Because it shook my teeth out.
Yes.
And now I have to make what's supposed to be my daily driver responsible on the street again.
Right.
As my dad shakes his head because, doing
Yeah.
silly things. But
Yes.
anyway, that was like like I said, step 3. So we started, I was history in the transmission performance world. So it wasn't scary for me to take something apart. And I had snap ring pliers and I had tools that kind of helped with that. So we started, let's take these apart. Well, and actually, I have to go way back. I was building a snowflake for my wife, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put an SYE in this.
Right off the bat.
Right off the gate.
Yep.
And if a little bit longer shaft is good, then an even longer one's better. So I went with a super short SYE on that, which was like this almost mystical,
Yes.
hard to find part. And I actually got that horse trading with another Jeep buddy. And so I had to take his apart and put it in together so it would work because I had an AX15 and there was this rumor of different inputs and all this other stuff. So I take this thing all apart and I think we start talking about that.
Right.
And you're like, hey, my YJ is also shaking my teeth out.
Yep.
And we need to do this. And it was really at that time and place, it was not the ease of working on your Jeep like it is now. If you couldn't physically do it yourself, if you didn't have a welder and couldn't make a bumper, or you didn't have the knowledge to do an SYE yourself or lift, that kind of stuff, there were places for you to go.
Sure.
Everybody like had a Jeep buddy that kind of knew.
That kind of knew. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
But it kind of knew.
Kind of knew enough to get it down the road. But when problems arose, you were kind of on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, oh, we know how to do this.
Right. With our powers combined.
Yes.
We can create.
I can put things together and he can enlist them and sell them. So we started remanning transfer cases, doing new chains and pumps and stuff like that. It was one of the first I knew of that were doing that and putting an SYE on there.
And we were putting an SYE on it. So basically you could reach out to us and, we not only was it a reman, obviously you could go to your standard auto parts supplier and get a remanufactured transfer case, but we were specifically selling to the off-road community. Mm-hmm. And so Scott's, we kept kind of perfecting our craft. Yep. And then equally, we knew the differences of the inputs, right? And so whether it was a 21 spline, whether it was a 23 spline,
long, short, medium,
all of those things, we started kind of learning a little bit trial by fire, a little bit of the research side of things.
And sometimes what you read on the internet is wrong.
Correct. And we started being able to take multiple cases and make, these really quality.
Well, we ended up into some situations where, CV head was dead and it blew the case apart. And now they're really screwed because now they don't have a case at all. And we were able to kind of custom build them a case. And while we're there, hey, we'll do the slip yoke for you.
And what we had gotten to the point was I was never afraid to ship internationally. So we actually got to the point where we were shipping these transfer cases with international shipping rules or opportunities. And so James finds us through that.
Yes. While he's off overseas.
Well, he's off overseas. And what he wanted to do was to utilize, at that time, a really common, what we thought was pretty common, something called a Terra Low.
Yes.
And so realistically, the Rubicon transfer case comes out in 2003.
Yes.
That rock track transfer case, which gives you a 4-to-1 deep crawl ratio. Prior to that, the Dana 300, you could find some swap kits for the Dana 300 easily enough. There were some other doubler kits and, specialty stuff like
everybody kind of, again, was, someone had a lathe or a mill. There was some Dana 20 swaps. There was some of the stuff, but it was very niche and very isolated at that moment. And Terralo kind of came and hit the scene, but it was expensive. And it was kind of...
It was problematic because what what people are doing, because exactly to play upon your concept that there weren't really professional businesses doing the installation of the Terralo.
You just happened to have someone that had casting experience, or they worked at a place that kind of had some stuff cast, and they were kind of like, hey, can I have some of these pieces made? So it was pretty, I mean, 6 parts at the time. But it wasn't refined. It wasn't.
And the oil
sorted.
valleys and the journals, the way that it oiled was its Achilles heel, because if you drove too fast, because people weren't making great choices with the Terralo setup, if you drove too fast, you would actually starve the sun and the planet gears and the forward bearings, and you would basically render the thing smoked.
Yes.
And so you had people running in the low range, but they're running 30, 40 miles per hour, and it just insufficiently oiled itself.
And I feel like we have to also cover when the Rubicon originally came out, obviously immediately Jeeps were wrecked or damaged, that kind of stuff. But those cases take out aftermarket, or not aftermarket, but like used, were like $2,000.
Oh, they were more than because they were more at that time, because and then they were comparable to an Atlas.
Yes, but it was almost like street cred of like, well, I got a Ruby transfer case, and spent all the money for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Terralo was kind of filling that. I want a 4-to-1, but I don't want to spend $3,000 for a Rubicon takeout. And Rubicons weren't everywhere like they are now. Now people buy Rubicon, I'm guilty myself, and just drive it to work every day.
Talking about a position of privilege, if you will. Yeah. Well, so James sees the ad for the reman cases, and he was like, I want you to reman me a case, but can you put this Terralo in it? And it was like, I was like, well, I think we could. And he said, well, we started to kind of court online. And again, he was international at the time, so coordinating phone calls and stuff was, had a bit of a challenge. And so we started talking and kind of verifying that this was, what he wanted to do. And I had known about the cases and known some other people running them and whatnot. I said, well, we should be able to acquire this case and start to build you out your setup. And he then reveals that while he is international at the time, he's got a Jeep sitting in Florida. He's got a frame being made out in Montana, Wyoming, and he has a suspension manufacturer who is supposed to be coordinating with this frame, and he wants us to build him a transfer case. And he's at the exact same time had a car being built in Texas, and so in this conversation, he's saying, he's managing this project. He's got a little bit of time because he's international, so he's not having to attend to his house or anything.
Right. He just gets to sit on the internet and dream.
Right. And he's having conversations with what he perceives to be viable manufacturers and builders and trying to coordinate the right parts and pieces. And eventually through the conversation, he says, well, honestly, I'm looking for somebody to take these pieces
and put them together.
And I was like, well, we can put things together. Like, we have done that. We had already done some interesting, you might remember, Great White was a 4-door YJ that we did a 4-wheel drive conversion. It was actually came in as 2-wheel drive. We didn't do the stretch. We did the 4-wheel drive conversion. We had done an XJ build that was really gnarly. We had done a number of these builds that were a little left of center, but cool. I said, well, we can put this vehicle together for you, and we'd be happy to help coordinate. We can do shipping and logistics and blah, blah, blah. So while that's kind of blossoming over here, we then go to try and find this Terralo, which at the time, Terraflex was a reputable company, actually rooted in some good off-road history at that moment. And so they had been producing some actually rugged off-road components. So we reached out to them. They're like, actually, we've discontinued that program. We're no longer supporting the TJ Wrangler market or the 231 transfer case. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me,
Yeah.
And they were like, maybe you can find one in the wild. And so then it started me on doing kind of what I'm particularly good at.
Yeah.
And, turning over all the rocks, to which we eventually found what we believe was the last production Terralo case, new, ready to be sold. right? To say that they're somewhere out there elsewhere sitting on somebody's shelf in their garage, that's new old stock. That's cool. That might be the case. But ours was actually in the distribution line. It was potentially the last one ever made, and certainly was the last one sold through the manufacturing logistics distributions.
Yeah, there was no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. We couldn't screw this up.
Yes.
Right. So we receive it, and Scott starts to do what he does.
Yep.
In the meantime, in conversation, we start to prepare the lift kit and the frame. Now, for purposes of transparency, I will publicly disclose that the frame was a throttle down customs frame, and the lift kit, which is on the Jeep today, was a metal cloak long arm locked and loaded with 6-pack game changer suspension. So we start having a conversation with those manufacturers. They were supposed to be talking to each other to ensure that the frame would accommodate the lift kit, and the lift kit specifications were provided to the frame manufacturer, so that when we received them, that they would just happily together.
Which, like all good projects, didn't happen.
Not even remotely close. So the interesting thing about James, and I had kind of alluded to this prior, is that his job had taken him all across the country. He had spent roughly 6 years in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And this particular Jeep that he had purchased new in 2001, he had taken on a number of Jeep Jamboree USA trips. He had done a number of local club adventures and wheeling in the early 2000s. And eventually, I mean, it is his daily driver. He took it to Wisconsin with him. And those Wisconsin winters and the rust belt of, middle America had touched the Jeep, is really what it had come down to. And
especially in that moment, because back in those days, cleaner TJs were pretty common.
Sure.
We weren't where we're at now, where we're like, hey, I got a rust flake over here and I got a rust flake over there, and I kind of could put a Jeep together.
Sure.
This was rustier than the norm.
And as a inhabitant at that time, where the Jeep was residing in Florida, it was rustier than other Jeeps in that area.
Yeah.
And his contention was that he could potentially, go out and purchase a new JK. That was very popular. And he said, I could go out and do that. Or I have this Jeep that doesn't owe me anything. He owns it free and clear. He had plenty of adventures in it. He had lots of memories. He took Andy wheeling and doing these activities and these adventures in it. And he said he could go out and he could invest the same amount of money that it would cost to buy a new Jeep into this one, and have a new frame and have some new axles and some other cool things like that done to it in the process. So at that point in time, we readied ourselves to receive this Jeep from Florida, the frame from out west, and the suspension. And parts started to convene at our property. Additionally, at the time, there was a company, and because I know that there's a number of you who are listening who had used their products. G2 was attempting to be a viable gear and axle provider. Were they? In hindsight, but they, you can only go so wrong if you're using Curry housings and other people's parts and pieces. It's whatever. So the interesting piece was they did. What was unique to them were the Core 44 axles. And the Core 44 was billed as kind of a hybrid, somewhere between an HD 44 and a 60, right? So we weren't exactly putting out the money of the components of a 60, but it was not just your run-of-the-mill TJ front 44 either.
And they were trying to make it bolt in, air quotes, into these Jeeps, which was kind of unheard of
100%
before this. Especially, it's kind of laughable at this point because, now with the current Jeeps you can do so much bolt on.
Yes.
But this was kind of a new thing back then.
Right.
So it was kind of exciting that you get a crate with an axle in it, and relatively you're putting it in the Jeep and it's ready to go. So
it was certainly even less so with the TJ and the XJ, you know, the small body market. And you know what, there were some admirable aspects of the core series. Now, that's not to be confused by the new age suspension manufacturers core 4x4. That's something else. This was an axle series by G2 at that time. It was an admirable pursuit, probably fell short on the fact that their parent company just didn't see the value in what they were doing, but pretty cool. So James had opted for these core 44 axles.
crate
axles. Which was new enough to the market. It was very kind of a peculiar situation, but inevitably wanted to do these robust axles, this slinky suspension, this new frame, take his driveline, which was pushing 200,000 miles, and just plop it in with the Terralo kit, right? The only thing he did at that time was add the Terralo kit to his 6-cylinder, his 5-speed, because he had already done some work on the 6-cylinder 5-speed. He had a melling oil pump. He had a high flow water pump. He had the replacement head, and that 4.0 was just soldiering along. He had already been through the 3550 5-speed transmission, which, if you're not familiar, is like the big cousin of the AX15.
Right.
Arguably, the AX15, in my opinion, is probably still a better transmission at this point, but it's in the eye of the beholder.
I'd say it's a little more easier to get pieces and parts for.
Yeah, it's the 3550 had a very short blip on the radar, so it's just not as well supported as the AX15. But he decided to put that driveline with the Terralo into the system, right?
Yeah.
And but in the process, he wanted to armor it to the best of his ability. He wanted the body to be as robust as possible. He wanted the frame to be as clean as possible.
That's for hunting the skunk ape.
The skunk ape.
Which, by the way, now that I've interrupted with that, Davey did send us more information on that.
Oh, fantastic.
The skunk ape is a mythical, hairy, human-like creature that is said to live in the swamps and forests of the southeastern United States. It's often compared to Bigfoot and is considered the cousin of that creature.
The southern cousin.
He did a thing.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That was awesome.
That was actually really good.
He needs to do our accents from
You
now
know
on.
what? I actually found myself listening or watching Yogi Bear a lot over the weekend.
Oh, I love Yogi.
I do a lot of Yogi impression too. I'm surprised I haven't busted that out on air yet. But maybe
Did
that's
you go
for the
get a
future.
picnic basket?
Jeff, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So here we go. So we put
Come
this
on,
Jeep together.
I want to hear Boo Boo.
We put this Jeep together, and realistically, it was just Greg and I at that time. We were just grinding away. I really look back fondly at that time. It was a big project for us by comparison. And
So do you identify that time as the before Scott or the before Jeff?
that was
era?
before Scott era. Scott was heavy part-time, but he was full-time employed elsewhere. And so that was just Greg and I grinding it out. And quite frankly, that was before Greg was even 100% full-time. He actually might have come on full-time in that time frame itself.
One of these times we'll have to, when we do the origin stories, we'll have to talk about how Greg became.
Oh,
That's
that's
a great
actually
story.
origin point 2.0. You know what I mean? So we grinded out, and so much so that there was this. I do want to share with everybody, and kind of this vulnerable standpoint. It was a big deal to us, right? We have, this where really things are starting to feel real, and I still remember, that moment where we turned the key and we drove it outside, and shunted it around the lot and drove it back in, and my dad brought us a bottle of sparkling grape juice, and we actually poured out and toasted because we had done this major logistics where we were utilizing manufacturers coast to coast for an international customer with a vehicle that was being shipped to us. I mean, we had customers from outside the area, but Not
this first time, like all of our, the transfer case part was
yes.
in there. We had used crate parts that we had never gotten to use before.
We're dealing with leading technologies that other people had not
Yes.
necessarily had their hands on, and we were stretching our capacity to potential.
Yeah.
And there was a whole bunch of things to surmount in the process. I mean, like I said, G2 was not great to deal with. The supply chain logistics were not great to deal with. We had some major ups and downs. Like we actually got billed out on the wrong axle. A JK or something axle showed up instead. There was a whole bunch of these quirky things. But inevitably, we built this Jeep and put it together in such a way that we could be very proud of it. It was this huge conglomeration of what makes us uniquely us, right? It's you're not going to go to your local service shop and do what we did in that specific situation.
Well, and kind of what I always love to use as an example, it came in on like 31s and it rolled out on 37s.
Yes.
Which that was a huge tire back then.
It was a massive tire.
Like, I remember going, oh my goodness, like
yes.
I was building an XJ on 33s at the time.
Right.
For my personal vehicle.
You're absolutely right. And it came in, the TJ, and it's important, everybody always sees it in its current configuration, but it came in on 31s.
Yeah.
And again, a 200,000 mile engine. It had rust in the frame was rusty.
Yep.
And it had a 2-inch budget boost on it.
Yeah.
And James had done all of these awesome adventures exactly like that.
Yep.
So it was just a kind of a neat, well put together. It was just a solid regular TJ. Now we shipped that back to him, and he has a great experience with it. It's good. It's solid for a couple of years.
Well, you gotta tell the story. He had it for a week.
No,
not that one.
Was it that time?
It was
frame?
that one.
Oh, okay. Well, then that was the part that I guess I missed in the lead up.
So we like all good builds, they go right to the wire.
Yes.
Ship it. He has it for exactly a week.
We were building with the time frame of him to go to Easter Jeep Safari.
Yep. And he gets it in Florida. He drives it around just for a little bit, and then loads up. I'm not mistaken, Andy and all the tools. And they drive it from Florida to Utah.
Yep, 100%. They went to Easter Jeep Safari.
So they didn't trailer it.
Nope, they were driving across the country.
Driving across the country on a vehicle that had just been completely split apart.
Yep.
All new parts
for
the most part. And got there and wheeled the crap out of it.
Yep.
And his, we're literally
it was a little trial by fire for us.
We're taking anxiety medication at the time.
Right. And the funny thing is, the biggest downfall was this particular shift linkage that we had on it, which a credit to the manufacturer of the shift linkage. They actually came up and personally worked on the vehicle trying to make it fit and work. Right as we were trying to get ready for the truck transport to, it was coming down our throat. It was supposed to be going on there. And there was this triumphant, make the shift linkage work situation.
Yep.
And ready for transport. And I thought it was funny because, I mean, on 37s, with a deep gear ratio, with they're directional tires. So in order to carry a spare that could be thrown on at any time, he carries dose spares.
Yep.
One mounted for the left side and one mounted for the right. He was running DOT approved Trepidors, which was a brand new tire.
Yep.
The sticky Treps were very famous on Fred Williams' Tube Sock. If you've watched that video, those are the non-DOT, if I recall. And so this was like a revolutionary tire. And so we shipped this down there, and he's got no time to vet it before they're driving across the country. And of course, they're trying to keep everybody posted as they stop at the gas station, right?
Yeah.
As they drive across the country. And I still remember post number 1, and they were so excited. And it was 3 hours in, they stop and fill up again. And it was post number 2, and it was 2 hours and a half, and they're filling up again. It was finally post number 3. They were all right, we might not keep everybody updated because this thing is really thirsty. It's drinking all the fuel,
But in any regard, he gets there, they wheel it, and he's seeing rigs break every trail.
Yes.
And not just break, like drive lines are spitting out, and Jeeps are undrivable, unusable without
Yes.
lots of like tinkering and trail fixes, and the Jeep just crawls through
The Jeep is
relatively for how
Yeah,
far
I think-
apart it was
I
and
think
how
the
much
phrase,
changes.
yes, and I think the phrase, and we did run into a shift linkage issue where I'm on the phone and we're trying to find some rando out in Moab. I'm
Yeah.
on the phone with a number of shops and part stores. We're Googling, doing all this stuff, and they end up finding a good Samaritan who has some equipment they can fix the shift linkage out there, and it's really no fault of anybody.
No.
Anything there, but it's just the reality of these things happen when you're so invasive and you're using so many different parts and pieces.
Hot rodding.
And ultimately, the Jeep, they use some phrase of like the Jeep was more robust and more capable than their comfort level.
Yep.
And that was perfectly satisfactory to them. They drive it home, they have a great experience. It's gone for a couple of years.
Yep.
And James decides that he wants to
Well, if it's going to be thirsty, let's make it really thirsty.
make it real thirsty.
Before we jump into that, Josh said good morning, and Daddy Jeep just joined us. Said, "What did I miss?" Daddy Jeep, you missed all of it.
All the
of it.
things. You missed it all.
We talked about skunk apes. We talked about the
You know
Super
what?
Bowl commercials that made us cry. Aliens that died.
yeah. We didn't talk about
Matthew
the alien
McConaughey.
dying, but we probably could have.
No, I'm just gonna leave that one out. So
So in any regard,
And now we're talking about the Squatch Patrol, which is how we got on skunk ape.
so he decides he wants to make it thirsty, and in true James fashion, we're not going to just do one thing.
no, he's a little bit of a purist too. He likes the
It
Mopar
has
line.
to have a Jeep engine
Yes,
in it. It cannot cross pollinate with other things.
yes.
So
While I accept all engine platforms, I also respect your guys' position to say I'm a GM guy, I'm a Ford guy, I'm a Mopar guy.
yes. So he builds.
Yeah, but even Ford drives Jeep.
Good one. Anyway,
Oh, good one. That's a knee slapper. Stop just.
so it's important again. In this time, we still had the
He's
Jeep
on fire
magazine.
today.
Yeah, JP Magazine and,
And
Peterson.
in the back of that used to say 4.6 stroker,
Yep.
and that was for our peasants like me. That was what you dreamed about stuffing in your XJ or your TJ.
100%.
And James is like, "Okay, that's what we're gonna do.
I see you. I'm going to have one custom built.
Custom built, and I'm going to then, if a little bit of displacement increase is a lot,
It's good.
is good. Then we're going to put a blower on
Then
it,
forced air injection is better.
even better because it's more efficient."
Yes.
And the problem is again, we're in the infancy of all this stuff. So today you can call up a multitude of different manufacturers, and you can just buy a kit and you can slap it on your Jeep, and you have a tune and all this kind of stuff. So they're taking a 3.8 liter V6 blower
GM blower, right?
and modifying it
yes.
to then strap it on the intake of a 4.0.
Yes.
And then you have all this sort of electronics that work.
Yeah. So once again, James starts doing phone calls and calling people and
Yep.
coordinating, and he puts, gets me involved. And we end up, he's getting an engine built by Chad Gallin Engine Performance, which
Yep.
you'll know is kind of a big engine builder out of New Hampshire. And he's building a 4.7 stroker.
Because
And
4.6 isn't enough.
right, 4.7. If it's we're going all the way, punching it all the way out.
Yeah.
And so he gets this this stroker built, and Gallin claims to do live dyno tune testing, and you can see your engine run. He does 6, 8, 10 hour break in on the dyno, all this stuff. And the engine shows up in a crate.
Yep.
And it's got all the trimmings. It's gnarly,
Yep.
And then he uses arguably what I would call a no-name blower builder.
Well, again, there wasn't anybody doing this at that time.
Sure.
So pretty much if you were interested in doing a blower, you kind of was like, "Hey, do you sell blowers?" And they go, "Yes, we
Yeah.
do." And, "Oh, by the way, you have a kit that sort of bolts it in my engine." awesome. Off to the races
Yep.
we go. So that's what happened. We put it together with a 4.7 with a blower, and James does.
And well, then I had to do all the remote tuning because now I'm
Yes.
working with the manufacturer of the blower because we had a piggyback computer.
Right.
And we had an AFR gauge and, readout.
Well, and it's important to note in the instructions for the blower, I remember this for probably the rest of my life. It says, do not use this size pulley. If you do this, bad things will happen. That's the Cliff Notes version. But James is like, I see that and I want that pulley, but there's one that's even smaller yet. And I want that one more because if a little boost is boosting, then all the boost is better. So we put the smallest pulley you can put on there. It's so small, it's not, the belt had to get smaller like 4 times.
Yeah.
And, and the wrap was so small, it
Yes.
was literally screeching the belt.
Yeah.
So
And-
we had to figure that out.
And the manufacturer did approve it. It did approve it.
Yeah.
Maybe lamenting a little bit.
Yes.
What they did approve it. And so then we took to the road and I was doing live. So instead of going to a dyno, you can do, what they call live tuning and it's real world. Some remote tuners will tell you it's more effective because you're actually driving it in a uncontrolled environment. The challenge is you got to get to race speeds
Yes.
on a legal and closed course, folks. Not using air quotes at all for those listeners at home.
On 4.5, 5.5 inch lifted, 37 equipped, long armed Jeep
Yes.
with a very angry 4-liter.
Yes.
It's no longer a 4-liter with a very tuned up blower. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And you're to the point you're gonna have to do the summary finish on this because we're out of time.
Well, we're halfway through, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the
part
big
2
thing
will
is
have to come out next
no, oh
week.
my gosh. we went ahead and in that regard there was a few icky picky things. Now, I think what's fun to mention is this was 18 or 19 at that point, I think. That we had not actually ever met James or Andy. I talked to him plenty of times on the phone. I had we're friends on
This is a
social
good spot
media.
to end this episode on.
And I think what is really neat about that specific situation was once we got done with all the tuning and all the fine tuning is the rest of the suspension and making it more of a slinky, we actually had to inboard or outboard the shocks. We actually Frenched in shock towers.
We did a Dub J brake and
Did a
upgrade.
Dub J brake conversion. I think we stretched and fine-tuned the suspension a little bit from his last time.
I actually kind of like his idea that we continue this episode next week to finish the love affair as we surround Valentine's Day.
I think that sounds wonderful.
And
I'll just
we can leave a little hint as to what is
Sure.
to be expected,
Sure.
but not actually give away too much.
So as we kind of got closer to summer, that specific rendition of the Jeep, Bantam was coming up. You personally at that time, we had actually started to get more internally into our division. So we really had our restoration department, which was what you were really overseeing. And then we had our performance division, which was really then became Greg's cup of tea. We had a couple part-time people coming and going to assist in other things, some other logistical pieces. Yes, we were still doing maintenance and whatnot. But that specific summer, we unveiled at Bantam Jeep Heritage Festival, Dose Jeeps. You had done a beautiful year one resto mod.
Yep.
On a 81 CJ7. 80 CJ7, right? Because it was
First
narrow
year
track.
First year for the 300 and first year for the T176.
Correct. And last year of the narrow track.
Yeah.
So we had done this beautiful resto mod, and then Greg was largely responsible for this built and blown TJ on long arms and in 37 Treps.
And it was so exciting that they flew in,
Yes.
Andy and James. And this is about the same time we realized that we had been saying his last name wrong
Yes.
the entire time
Yes.
to this point. And I don't remember exactly how that happened. If it was finally I pulled us aside and was like, hey, it's gone on long enough, but this is actually saying my name wrong.
Right.
And
Right.
we're horrified.
Yes. Like for years, I've called you the wrong name.
Yes.
You think we could have told me 5 years ago,
Right.
maybe, you know?
So in any regard, it was really cool to finally meet them. And they drove the Jeep away from Bantam.
Yes.
So
And
what were you saying his name as?
Highlands, and it's Hillens.
Oh.
yeah, I think we still.
I was
screw
going
that
to say,
up a
that's
lot.
internally still wrong.
I don't ever. It's Hillens, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we were putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
still are. Because I didn't realize that.
It's fine.
I
I can't barely talk as it is. So
Anywho, it does go away, but we're not done yet,
yes.
and
you have to find out next week
the saga continues
of what happened to that
for a couple
very
more,
small pulley, so small, in the 4.7.
and eventually the Eagles do fly in this.
Because if we're going to use gas,
let's use all
the gas.
And the most recent rendition of it is yet even a more profound upgrade that just
And if 8 spark plugs are good, 16 are even better.
16
I'll leave
spark
it at
plugs and a dump truck transmission to handle all that
and
literally.
horsepower.
And we'll go over that next week.
And if you this is your moment, folks, go out and get something for somebody you love for Valentine's Day.
Yes.
This is your warning shot, your sign, your symbol of do something right now. Today is I believe the 10th. And so you've got a couple days, but let's not wait up until, the night of the 13th or the morning of the 14th.
And for those other Scots out there, should take one that they tell me all the time. Don't get them Jeep parts. They unless they really ask for it.
Unless that's, or you want G parts, tell your significant other you want that. But
Yeah.
I would think we should leave blenders and vacuums on the Amazon list. Don't do that.
Yes.
Until then, folks, Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Jeep on.
So on the Valentine's note, because it just clicked in my head that I can totally already say I covered this. Well, first, a little for me. So I got a press brake. The new Harbor Freight tool of the year is their press brake.
Mm-hmm.
Something they just came out with, and I watched a couple of reviews, and it was said to be as good or better than Swag Off-Road's press brake, which I was excited about because now I can just go into my local Harbor Freight, or as we call in our house, not Tractor Supply,
Not Tractor Supply.
which happens to be side by side at our
Okay.
location. Anyway, and get that. Well, then I realized my press lives at SFJ.
Yes, we've not talked about this, so we're gonna do it on air. Sounds wonderful.
Oh, boy.
Here we go, truth time.
Yeah.
Because I saw the post a couple weeks ago or a week ago, and it was like, well, I need a press. And I was like, oh, God, I know where his press is. I was like, what are we going to do about this?
Yes. So I did not realize, like most things, I was born with a mechanical spoon in my mouth, I guess, that we just had welders and benches and vices you could beat on things, and a car lift at some point, and a mill and a lathe and all that other kind of stuff. And then I got slowly, as I've grown and people have passed and that kind of stuff, I've gotten woke up that is not the case
Right.
for most people. So I've had to figure out how to adapt and overcome that. I did not know how expensive shop presses were any bit. And the fun story of the press we have here, my dad literally traded a Harbor Freight press for that press, and it is a Napa big Mama Jama press.
Right.
Any regard, it is huge, and it does not fit in my shop. So it has been here for ever.
A long time. Yeah.
So I was like, well, I can drive to the shop and I can use it, or I could get a smaller press for at home, is what my thought was. So I go in, I look, and I'm like always, I'm cheap, and I'm thinking like $75, $100. I was not ready for used presses to be what a press at Harbor Freight costs. And I'm
Mm.
like, no, I've already spent like $130 with a coupon for the press brake. I'm not going to be $500 in on this project.
Sure.
And because we had a lift growing up,
Just pointing out, Uncle Bob is trying to interrupt our podcast here.
Well, I think he was successful. If
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho's, we had tons of bottle jacks for lifting up vehicles on the lift.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a good hoarder, I've held on to all those.
Oh, perfect.
So I had a 20-ton, I have a 10, and I think I have a 7. And I'm like, well, I have a jack, and I have steel, and I have a welder, and I have a brain. So I'm going to make my own press.
Nice.
And I had a bunch of people tell me that was silly, and I should just buy one. It was a waste of my time. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm doing it anyway.
Sure.
So I go out, and I had 3 sticks of steel left over from my dad, 2 pieces of C-channel, and 1 long piece of heavy angle iron. I'm like, this is a perfect
Nice.
use of that material. You know what happens to steel that sits for 12 years or more?
Rusts.
It rusts.
It rusts.
So the C-channel is not that great anymore. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what? I don't care. I'm using it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start cutting steel and start putting stuff together. And I had some other square tubing that I get given that was actually from a railroad place. Amy's uncle took it home,
Sure.
back of his pick 'em up truck, gave me some. So I
Hot Rod Lincoln.
built this press out of complete crap stuff I had laying around. I had
Yes.
springs off the plow from my 4-wheeler.
Nice.
I had upgraded. Again, don't throw things away. So I used those with my old jack.
See, this is just kind of validating your hoarding nature.
It is.
Ah,
So went ahead and built it, proved it was able to bend stuff. Did bring the press brake in here, made some stuff with it. So very good investment on there. I'm pretty happy. Started painting and cleaning it up so it actually looks like a piece of equipment, not just a hobbled together scrap steel yesterday. And then my wife came home and she's like, hey, I know it's only 3:00 in the afternoon, but I'd really like to have storage under my washer and dryer. And like most things with my wife, I go, well, then it's my job to make your dream come true,
mm-hmm.
be it a white Jeep or other things. So she tells me her idea, and she's like, oh, we're just going to take this plywood off and we're going to cut it and we're going to use this hoarded hinges and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but that's going to look hokey. So why don't we just go get real doors? Well, I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. They don't sell doors, and they're very expensive when you do order doors.
Right.
Cabinet
doors.
Cabinet
Cabinet
doors.
Yeah. Cabinet cupboard doors. Yeah.
So what do? I go to the scratch and dent or the returns, and they had a $357 cabinet with 2 pull-out drawers for $50. I'm like,
Heck yeah.
heck yeah. So throw that in the back of the JT, go home, immediately tear it apart, and cut the plywood, get it all assembled, realize that one drawer full width is perfect. Works great. Other side, not so much. So now I learned how to take a drawer apart in its entirety without making it look like junk.
Mm-hmm.
Put it all back together, get that operating, to just realize that the doors overlap a half an inch. So now I have to move the face plates over. And then I realize I'm sitting there on the floor and I realize, wait a minute, they're not the same height.
This is like that moment when you're doing a transmission swap and you're contemplating life before
Yes.
you either have to bench press it down onto you or push it back into
Yes,
place.
choices have already been made.
Choices have been made.
Credit cards have been billed.
I'm cold. I'm unhappy,
Yes.
and I have. That's that moment you're sitting on the floor.
And not to
going,
mention,
I have to do
she
this.
is just tickled.
Oh, I'm sure she is.
And again, we've used everything just laying around the house. So we have about $51 in this project.
Right.
And I'm like, the doors aren't the same height because they were on top of each other in the cabinet before. It didn't matter. Now I have them side by side. They're a half an inch difference.
I see.
And I'm like, oh. That sucks. So now I would have to take the door the face off again, take it apart even further, trim things out. And I had to go find my router. I use router bits that my dad bought me.
Wow, look at you.
Oh, yes.
If you're not really a great woodworker,
No.
it's not ever been your confidence.
I
and-
pushed this envelope off the
Yeah, you
rails and
did.
pushed it over the hill.
Yeah, you did.
So I'm like, and she's like, it's okay. They can be a half an inch off.
Nice. That's still really cool. I'm really
So,
proud of the fact that you.
She's pretty tickled, and she was
Yeah.
able to put crap in her drawers last
I'm sure
night.
she's even more thrilled about that.
So-
knowing you guys.
Yep. So I guess that's her Valentine's present.
Yeah, that's a from the heart situation
Nice.
there. And Jeffrey, anything?
So we got suckered into a pellet stove by Tractor Supply.
Yep. Yep.
That
They
happened.
Did.
The
They did.
actual
They-
Tractor Supply, not the.
not Tractor Supply.
Yeah,
Yes.
we walked in because we, around Christmas got 2 kittens, so we walked in to get a bigger litter pan because they're growing and need bigger.
Sure.
And as we walk in, Kristen just kind of looks over and sees the pellet stoves and goes, "Oh, look, they got them," and that was it. Just because she's wanted one for a while. We go to walk forward.
For your garage.
Yeah.
To trim out your garage.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So we go to walk forward, and the manager comes running over. He's like, "Somebody's looking at him. I'm going to sell it." And he's like, I'll sell you that one for $700. And it's normally a $1,200 pellet stove. And I'm like, "No, shut up. Get out of here." And as we're having the conversation, Lily sees this ginormous stuffed horse on top of a rack towards the back of the store. I don't even know how she saw it from where we're at.
They have their ways.
And she goes, "I want that." And he goes, $10. You get the pellet stove and that. $700 for the pellet stove, $10 for the horse. I'll sell it right now. And I'm like,
This was not in the plan. This was not in the budget line
no,
item.
we're not here for that today. And he's like, I'm telling you, it's below my cost. I need it to go. It was ordered, and it had the smallest little dent on the side, and the guy on it didn't want it and made us reorder another one. So I just need to sell it. And he's like, I've got four stoves left total, but this one it needs to go.
Sure.
And I'm like, no, I don't want it. And he's like, all right, I'll give you guys some time to think about it. And he walks away. And
And the women of your house look at you.
no, Kristen just goes like this. I'm transferring the money.
Oh my goodness.
So that unfortunately means that the cost of the stove is one thing, but I don't know if you're familiar with the stove pipe that goes with that.
Stovepipe is super pricey.
Oh,
Things you don't
stupid
know until you know
expensive.
it.
Oh, I knew it. I literally said, it's going to cost as much to vent this thing as it is to buy the damn thing.
Mhm.
So that's what I did Sunday. I spent 10 hours in the garage reorganizing the garage. Honestly, the vent pipe of it and getting that set up went really quick.
Nice.
That wasn't bad, but I spent 10 hours Sunday out in the garage, and
Yep.
I had a heated garage, and
Which is
I was
super
able
cool.
to keep working through it.
What a nice accomplishment, honestly, for both of you to say that the kind of the life goals, things that come together like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to go in the garage because obviously we're going to be building Davey a desk
Mhm.
for here at the shop, and I wanted to have my garage reorganized and reset up to be able to properly build this desk for
SFJ
him.
is a good catalyst for excusing why you spend money. I 100% empower
That's
you.
for us as ourselves and our customers.
Absolutely.
We're all about reinvestment. You know?
Yeah, and
That's
it'll
so
be really
funny.
good. I got, 2 giant garbage bags full of stuff out of my garage. I've got some old Jeep parts that I'm going to throw in
I feel like that's
in the
very
bin here.
validating. As long as you're throwing something away, you can totally bring on more, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that how it works?
I think so. How about you? What was your weekend?
You know what?
You were
I'll
out of
keep
town,
it.
right?
Yeah, I'll always say I'll keep it real short and simple because, as far as my own personal stuff is concerned, obviously I'm in the throes of the house at this point, which I'm very excited about moving towards spring. And so if you're on Patreon, I want to give you some updates as far as how the house build is going because we're really looking to make a move soon. Additionally, right now, personal vehicles are occupying real estate within the shop at the moment.
Yes, you have all
And-
broken Jeeps.
I've got all broken vehicles, so I can't even say that I did a good Jeep adventure over the weekend. As we, did our adventuring, we ended up having to use a borrowed vehicle in the process. But we did have a nice family adventure, which is always one of the things I live for. But I thought it was funny that one of the things that I did power through, and it kind of felt, it was one of those, oh man, self-imposed abuse moments where I powered through a rusty Hyundai job, where the rust is coming off in basically sheets.
Yeah.
And it was biting me back, and it was one of those it was done on the floor because all of our lifts and all of our normal things are occupied, and it was one of those situations where, because of the nature of what we were doing and how we were doing it, I really didn't have any choice but to be successful.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's very motivating to be like, I don't really have any plan B or plan C. I just have to get the job done, and so we were helping out kind of a new employee, and kind of helping set them up for success. So some interesting things in the works, from the build to the family aspect to kind of our reinvestment, or kind of, I don't know. It was fun to do floor work and have that kind of that pressure to be like, it's a sink or swim situation, and I have to swim. So I think it'd be fun real quick. I do know that we typically try not to engage comments, but I thought it was funny that Daddy Jeep had said, what if I get her a whole Jeep? It's even red for Valentine's Day. Okay, I think that's fair. One thing
I have done that.
I was gonna say, the one thing I would, my wife is a particular odd duck, but I would ask her first, because I've bought my wife a couple vehicles, and nothing sets her hair ablaze than when I try to just spoil her and give her a vehicle.
Yes.
So, if you're, like my wife, maybe ask her if she wants to be part of that major transaction. And Motorama in Harrisburg, man, I forgot about that coming up. It's a super cool, kind of a hot rod vehicle piston power-esque show. So if you are in the Western Pennsylvania vicinity, whether whether that's Eastern Ohio or Northern West Virginia, Motorama might be a cool way to stretch your legs. Mid-America Off-Road is happening here in the very near future, towards the end of the month. And obviously OVJ did the Starlight, and they had a very successful ride. Maybe next year we'll be able to attend. And lastly, I see the owner of Cookie Monster has weighed in, saying hello as well.
Well, you also missed the request for wanting Jeep parts for Valentine's Day.
Oh, somebody said, I definitely want Jeep parts for Valentine's Day. So, maybe have that conversation with your loved one and see where that goes. Might just be the trick to turning on the love lamp or the love light in the process.
Maybe.
Or the check engine light.
Oh. Whoa. Whoa. Someone needs some therapy.